Today we are making an emerald and diamond ring in platinum. Full disclosure, this is a CAD designed ring. What that means is I digitally made the ring on my computer after measuring all the stones and everything, working out the proportions and getting the customer's correct finger size. So after I've done that, I sent the files away to our casting company, and they then in turn printed the ring, made a mold of it, and added molten platinum to the mold, and on the other end pops out the ring. I then receive all the bits and pieces of the ring, and then it still needs to be cleaned up and assembled, and then obviously set. So if that's something you're interested in, please stick around. You might learn something. So the main attraction is this 4.51 carat emerald. It appears to be a Mozambican emerald. I can't say for sure, but I do think it is. It does have a few flaws in it, which makes it quite risky to work with, and especially towards the end when it needs to be set. So not looking forward to that side of it, but that's where experience comes into play. So you might notice there is quite a few serious inclusions, but the transparency of it is awesome. It's got a lot of luster, uncommon for emeralds, and that would also determine or bump up the value at least of this particular stone. These are the different components of the ring as they arrive from the casters. Give you some sort of an idea what I'm starting out with. So let's get right into it. This ring had a little spruce section there which I've already filed away. Now what's left to do is get rid of all the printing lines. As you can possibly see there, it's all rough and gritty. Might be able to better see it in the inside of the ring. All there's none of it is shiny. All of it is still rough and crusty, and we need to get rid of that. You can quite nice to see all the print lines there, which is caused when it's printed in wax, and that then in turn gets transferred into the mold, and this is what we're left with. I'm not always sure if it's worth printing it with all the amount of work that needs to be done after casting, but here we are. So what you want to do, you want to start out with a fairly coarse grit sandpaper and just start cleaning. So everything is cleaned up and ready to be soldered together. So I add a bit of flux, which is not really necessary for soldering platinum, because platinum melts at 1700 degrees Celsius and at 3092 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's really resilient. It's actually a joy to solder. But it's so in my nature to use flux, so I add it anyway. Yeah, just soldering everything together, make sure everything's nice and secure. Look at that puppy melt. See how hot it gets? really cool. It's one of my favorite bits when working on platinum. So there you can actually see it quite nicely. I use a powder flux. I know a lot of jewelers out there use the liquid flux. That's not the way I was trained. I really struggle with the liquid flux. Powder flux is my go-to flux. If you would like to know more about that, because you get different temperature fluxes, powder flux, I'm happy to share that information with you. So now we've got everything soldered together. I polished everything, made sure everything is nice and shiny, and then I started setting the stones. Obviously you'll notice I've skipped a few steps in the video, because what you got to remember and keep in mind is that making jewelry takes a long time, and this particular ring took me 3 days to make, because it's a lot of work and a lot of fine detail. And when you're making a piece like this for a client and they're paying good money for a product, you want to make sure that you've put all the effort in just to make it perfect, or as close to perfect as possible, because this is a piece that you will love and enjoy for a good amount of years to come. So if you take anything away from this, is make sure when you make jewelry that you put all your best effort in to make the best product possible. So now we've got the emerald in place. I've burred away all the excess metal to allow the stone to sit down in its seat. Next we'll use the hammering tool just to hammer those prongs down nice and tight onto the stone. Obviously taking care not to damage the stone, because this was a nerve-wracking bit, is getting that stone in place and all squared up without damaging it. And the next step is just filing all the prongs uniform. I prefer having a nice little V shape to the prongs, just to get a nice elegant look. This little bristle brush that I used in the previous scene is a lovely tool, but be careful, it's not emerald friendly, so you got to be careful not to damage the stone. This little tool, you might recognize it, those of you who've been in the trade quite long. It's just a little diamond wheel, a dented diamond wheel, and it just gives a nice extra shine to the prong without damaging the stone. So yeah, all that's left to do is just to give it a nice final once over, making sure everything is nice and tight and secure, and then give it a final polish. I prefer using this little synthetic hairbrush with white polish, and that gives me an awesome finish, as you can see in that last scene there. I'm quite happy with the way it turned out. Let me know what you think. Drop me a note in the comment section below, and consider subscribing to our channel, The Chunky Jeweler. Looking forward to seeing you in our next video. Already working on it, so stay tuned and stay creative.